I co-direct the Disability Studies program at Penn State. And by the way, the Paternos, especially Sue Paterno, are very supportive of disability studies. Sue Paterno also works in Pennsylvania Special Olympics. And we're like acquaintances and all. And one of the things I find is that there are 30, 40, 100 or 200 different constituencies in every university dealing with disability. They just don't know it. They call it health, or they call it aging, or they call it communications disorders, or they call it rehabilitation. And it's very hard to get everyone working on the same page, under the same umbrella, and to come to a place where actually people are working under the heading of cognitive disability, under the Coleman Institute. Thank you, Claudia and Bill, for doing this, and thank you for having me here tonight. What I'm going to say tonight consists of basically things more or less like the book Life as We Know It. I actually do have prepared remarks. Jamie is, I think he's watching the scene. Yeah, he's like listening with one ear. He knows perfectly well that his father is talking about him. And he will be most of the subject of tonight's talk. But I know I'm competing with dinner and with a long day and salsa, so I'll try to be lively. And so I'll kick things off with Peter Singer. In his 1994 book, Rethinking Life and Death, Peter Singer famously or infamously claimed that, and I quote, "To have a child with Down syndrome is to have a very different experience from having a normal child. It can still be a warm and loving experience, but we must have lowered expectations of our child's ability. We cannot expect a child with Down syndrome to play the guitar, to develop an appreciation of science fiction, to learn a foreign language, to chat with us about the latest Woody Allen movie, or to be a respectable athlete, basketballer, or tennis player." Close quote. Good, there's no hissing. All right. Usually in disability and cognitive disability circles, you mentioned Peter Singer. But for those of us who work with Down syndrome, in whatever capacity, this is a deservedly infamous passage, and much of what I will say tonight consists of an extended rebuttal of it. Not that I had to do much work on this front on my own. Actually, for the most part, my rebuttal consists of accounts of Jamie's life and his progress over the last 10 or 12 years. Life as We Know It came out in 96, 97. It was 97 in paperback, for those of you keeping track. But I was writing it in 94, 95, when Jamie was just 3 or 4. And I have to admit that if I had read that passage from Singer back then, I might have fallen for it. You know, when your kid is that young, what do you know? I did not know what to expect when we had Jamie, but I did expect that we would have lowered expectations for him. And what I've found ever since is that I have to keep moving the goalposts. That Jamie keeps moving the goalposts for me. Now, okay, it's true that he doesn't play the guitar. I'll give Peter Singer that much. But his interest in Star Wars and Galaxy Quest, by the way, how many people have seen Galaxy Quest? Not enough. Brilliant, funny movie. Really undersung movie. All right. It's about Star Trek fandom. Oh, I won't spoil it for you. But because it involves actors being actors, and for Jamie to understand this involves actors playing actors who don't know they're actors, I won't spoil it. But it's a great movie. So he has an appreciation of science fiction. Got that part. And his fascination with Harry Potter has led him to ask questions about justice and injustice, about who is innocent and who is guilty. We're just finishing the final book in the series. In fact, to come here tonight, well, I wouldn't carry the entire last book with me in a carry-on bag, so we Xeroxed about 40 pages. We are this far from the final and 7th book. And for the last few months, Jamie has been asking whether Harry will turn into Voldemort in the end. Yeah, that's an entirely appropriate and really quite profound question, which for obvious reasons I will not answer for those of you who have not finished the series. Okay. Jamie is learning a foreign language, having mastered the escoutou question from French, and he's, I say, enviably able to charm young women in French supermarkets by saying, "Je voudrais du fromage de chèvre, s'il vous plaît." He really does like goat cheese. So, now, I will confess to you that neither he nor I has the least interest in chatting about the latest Woody Allen movie, but perhaps Professor Singer would be someday interested to learn that Jamie and I have had a running conversation over the past 5 or 6 years about the movie Babe. No, that introduced Jamie not only to the question of whether it is right to eat animals, it's a big thing for Singer, like his entire career, but also it introduced Jamie to the fact that there are various theories out there as to why humans eat some animals and not others. For those of you who have seen the movie, for those of you who haven't, the dogs believe that humans eat only stupid animals. That's the utilitarian philosophy right there. And they believe that pigs are definitely stupid, which, of course, Babe disproves. The duck, however, and Jamie so identifies with the duck believes that humans will not eat indispensable animals like cats and roosters and decides that he will be spared if he learns how to crow at daybreak. Now, true story. 4 weeks ago, almost to the day, Jamie and I, last time we traveled together, were at a conference at SUNY Stony Brook that featured Peter Singer. It was a conference about cognitive disability and moral philosophy. And he had a packed room, so Jamie and I occupied the spillover room. Jamie was playing Harry Potter. I was sitting by him. And as Jamie was negotiating Harry Potter and the CD-ROM, there was Singer up on the video feed talking about at what level of cognitive capacity people are not really persons and aren't really rights-bearing citizens, and I live for this moment. Let's let Peter Singer trying to do this thing with Harry Potter here. It actually was a little weirder than that. There was a moment at which Singer had argued that I hope I'm quoting accurately, if a rational alien being arrived disguised as a human right now, I would have more in common with that being than I would with a person with severe cognitive disabilities. And I started to laugh. And Jamie's like, Michael, he's called me Michael ever since he was a teenager. Michael, what's so funny? I said, he just said a very silly thing, that's all. Are there any Simpsons fans? Do you remember Deep Space Homer, where Homer is in a spaceship and he hits the ant farm, and the ants start to float around in the space capsule, and Kent Brockman, the newscaster, says, well, from the feed we have here, it looks like the ants have taken over the space capsule. We don't know much more, but we know the ants will soon be here. There's no stopping them. And I, for one, welcome our insect overlords. And I'd like to remind them that as a respected TV personality, I can be of use, subjugating other humans. And this is what Peter Singer is going to do. He's going to be, as a utilitarian philosopher, so it was a very funny joke that only I got. But Jamie is a Simpsons fan, and whether you got the point about Peter Singer, and not the point, I'm getting ahead of myself. 12 years ago, I published a book about Jamie and our experiences over our first 4 years of his life, and about our expectations for him, which I'll get back to. Now, Jamie knows there's a book about him. He knows that people read about him. He's promised me that he will help write a follow-up book when he graduates from high school. This will be about 4 years from now. And when it comes to talks like this, he knows the drill. A few years ago, I told Jamie I'd be speaking to him about a large room full of people, and that one of the stories I would tell would be the story about the pizza in the microwave. The pizza was wrapped in tinfoil. And the results were kind of scary, and Jamie was a little uncomfortable with this because, and I said, no, it's really a good story about how you became more independent. When he saw smoke billowing from the microwave, he ran up and got me and said, I need help. And now we always know to take things out of the tinfoil and put them in the microwave for 22 seconds, which I think is a little conservative, but that's all right. So on this occasion, a few years ago, I asked Jamie if I could tell the story of the day he was sad, or whether it was private. And Jamie told me it was private, and it has remained private ever since. The question of what is public and what is private is awfully obscure and abstract. But as we all know, it determines what we can say and what we can do and what we can wear or not wear in various locations, from the living room to the locker room. And Jamie and I are working it out as we go. Now, he's reached milestones neither he nor his mother nor I ever imagined for him. He plays golf with me and may be the most patient golfer I've ever seen. He'll miss the ball a couple of times and then smack it beautifully, and he never gets frustrated. On the other hand, lest I sound too sanguine about him, I should oppose this to when his computer does not work and I cannot fix it immediately, in which he is extremely impatient. He loves Renaissance art and asks to go to Barnes & Noble to buy books on Da Vinci and Caravaggio, and he knows more about sharks than almost anyone who doesn't study them for a living. Two caveats at this point. One, Your mileage may vary. Okay? There's no guarantee. I never suggest that there's any sense in which Jamie is a marker for anyone else with Down syndrome. You know the aphorism when it comes to kids with autism. When you've met one kid with autism, you've met one kid with autism. Right? There are kids out there who ride bikes beautifully. Jamie never got it. There are kids out there with Down syndrome who are good musicians. Jamie never got that either. The other thing is that I want to stress that most of Jamie's milestones that I'll be talking about tonight are of his own devising. Jana and I never sat down and decided that we wanted to have a child with Down syndrome who could do and know all these amazing things. We're not pushing him. We're not the helicopter parents from hell. But we do listen carefully whenever he expresses enthusiasm for something. And whenever we hear that enthusiasm, we try to encourage it all we can. And it really is just a matter of listening. 7 years ago, when Jamie was just 10, I heard him muttering something in his room, something about 3 and 7, 21. Jamie, I said. I walked down the hall to his bedroom. Were you just doing multiplication in your head? He became shy, like I caught him watching Hannah Montana on YouTube. And that's not a facetious reference. Now, I thought of this with Bill's talk this morning. Jamie calls YouTube his YouTube. And we were talking after your talk this morning about how it's no one's YouTube. No, everyone uploads everything to YouTube. We spend some time watching Austin Powers on YouTube, all the various things between YouTube and Wikipedia that really are collective creations on the web, co-creations. And I said, no, that's great. You're doing math. What's 4 times 6? And Jamie said, it's too hard. 24. He said it exactly like that. And that pattern has repeated itself time and again. In 4th grade, his class did a social studies unit on Japan, and Jamie responded by becoming fascinated with Mount Fuji and by the very fact that the Japanese have a different writing system, radically different from ours. And he was so fascinated that he went to State College's only passable Chinese restaurant that year and asked his waiter how to pronounce the Chinese characters on the menu beginning with Jingding, or Golden Wok, the name of the restaurant. I should add that he also is fascinated with when restaurants opened. He wants to know, he asks waiters how to say thank you in Hindi just because they're working in an Indian restaurant, or he asks when the restaurant began. This is a very recent concern, and I have to say not every waiter or waitress in the country shares his fascination, and sometimes... But that's what got Jamie interested in languages, was this unit on Japan. And that's what gave us, his parents, the idea that after he was briefly introduced to Spanish and French in 6th grade, and he loved the experience, he might actually want to take French in 7th grade. It was his choice. Now, unfortunately, that year he was assigned to a para who was kind of withdrawn and depressed and didn't see the idea of helping a child with Down syndrome learn French as an opportunity, saw it as a burden. I'm sorry to say that's the only negative experience we've ever had with a paraprofessional. And we actually had an extended negotiation. Please feel free to ask me more about this if you'd like to, where we had him mainstreamed in math, French, and science. And he got booted out of math because he wasn't understanding the difference between area and perimeter, even though it was clear to me that he did understand the difference. But then they said, we're going to get now to the area of irregular shapes. And I said, oh, screw that. I used to joke that when we finally got to the volume of a cone, there's no reason for Jamie to know the volume. How many people know the volume of a cone? 4/3 pi r squared. Okay, good. Very good. Meh. But there's no real, unless Jamie has to calculate cones in his head, there's no real reason for him to go that far. So we said okay with the math, but we pleaded to keep him in science and French, and it worked. And to this day, he was reading some of the posters outside. He knows what cells are. He knows what cell interactions are. He doesn't understand all the details, but then neither do I. And then in 8th grade, he took classes in art and music. And most of the people I speak to say, oh, that's great, he got to express himself. No. What got him interested was that these are courses in the history of Western art and music. They asked Jamie to understand and identify medieval, Renaissance, Baroque, Romantic, and modern forms of art and music. I promise you this was not our idea, right? We were not pounding on the doors and demanding that he be acquainted with the works of Bach, or we would sue the school district, right? No, we simply noted the fact. One day he comes home, and he's getting ready for bed, and Jamie said unprompted, Stravinsky, that's another great composer we forgot. So Janet and I responded by going to Barnes & Noble and getting him one of those Fandex cards. We brought them along. You know, these things. It begins with, there's Mozart at the front, but Vivaldi and so forth. Well thumbed, I might add. Now, he doesn't actually like listening to the composers. He's a teenager. His tastes range from the Beatles to the alternative rock world of Ted Leo and the Pharmacists and the band known as British Sea Power. But now he has these Fandex cards for painters, African countries, dog breeds, and U.S. states. And he's managed to memorize a good deal of them along the way. I think he knows all the state capitals. He knows that you have buffaloes here. He knows all the major football and basketball teams across the country. It's like he has his own personal Fandex for these things, a catalog of information that he can unfold from his remarkable mind at will. Okay, let me switch gears, though, and talk about Jamie in a different register. This story is not about how good his memory is. This is about what he's like. Traveling with him is like nothing else in the world. He's come a long way since, about 5-6 years ago, he decided in one roadside stop, let's put our fingers in the urinal. Last night, as we came in, and he was so amazed by Denver Airport. I said, wait till you see it from the outside. And as we drove out along that bizarre private highway, whatever it is, with those tolls every 10 yards, you've been on it, I see. Jamie says, it looks like a circus. Yeah, it gets better. Then he says, it looks like Sydney. He's like, Sydney in Australia. Yes, it does. This Cosmo kid, and now he's never been to the Sydney Opera House, neither have I, but he knows what they look like. And he loves everything about traveling. He likes the packing and the driving in the airport and the rental car and the hotel, the actual destination. He loves the pool. There must be a pool. But he likes to tell stories about traveling, too. He likes to tell the story about the time he had to have a Coke in 7 o'clock in the morning in the Dublin airport because there was no milk anywhere for sale, or the time a few days later his parents left his retainers in a Dublin hotel. And now I'm going to tell a brief story that speaks to some of the challenges and rewards about traveling with him. It's a story that he and I have talked about. We've agreed it's not private. It was about 2 years ago we traveled to Seattle and Vancouver for a meeting of English department heads. I've never been the head of an English department. I will never be the head of an English department. Never mind why I was going. I was asked to go for some other reason. So we flew into Seattle, and then we drove 2 hours to Blaine, Washington. We got in at 1, which is 4 our time. And we had to understand about the time as well. And then we took a day trip to Vancouver. On our way into the city, Jamie said we were running out of film. I told him he was quite wrong. I knew there were 12 exposures on the little disposable camera. But when we sat down to lunch al fresco next to the Capilano suspension bridge, I watched him drinking his soda and just being so cool. I said, look, you look great. Let me just take a picture of you. And I realized there was no film in the camera. We were running out, Jamie said. I see. You mean that when we crossed the border into Canada and I went and changed our money into Canadian dollars, you took all the pictures in the camera in the car? And then you told me we were running out of film. Yes, Jamie said with a wry smile. And then he says, Michael, are you going to sigh? I said, no, I sighed. We'll just get another camera, you Ignats. Say, oh, what am I going to do with you? Jamie said. This is a line from Curious George, but he finds it appropriate, right? And I said, yes, Jamie, that's a very Curious George thing to do, to use up all the film, take the pictures in the car. What am I going to do with you? And he grinned and rubbed his hands together. And at the end of lunch, I said, look, we both have to go to the men's room before we go to the Capilano Bridge. Have people been to this bridge? It's like a walking bridge. It's just like, And when he was young, Jamie was very conservative. He went through a great deal of physical therapy just to get him confident enough to walk on bridges, never mind one that sways back and forth 1,500 feet up in the air. And sure enough, we were behind the one who jumped all the way across the bridge. But Jamie was good with this, and he was good with the restaurant. He decided he would go in, find the bathroom all by himself. I said, fine, ask a server if you can't find the right way. I'll wait for the check. He came back in a few minutes. His hands were washed. Everything was all set to go. The check had not arrived, even though we were only 2 people in the place. And Jamie said, let's go. I said, no, we're still waiting for the check. He said, why? I said, I don't know why. But the check arrived. I had the credit card already. We're all paid up. I said, now you have to wait. I'll go to the men's room. And I came back, and Jamie was waiting very patiently. He hadn't wandered away, but he had this odd canary-eating expression on his face. And I thought, maybe I should just check the check. And sure enough, on the $23 bill for lunch, Jamie had written just under my $30, the figure $90. I gave him this look, and Jamie says, "Say, I wish you wouldn't." "I wish you wouldn't," I said. You cannot leave $90 on this check. It is too much money. Jamie smiled again. I said, no, really, don't do that, please. It'll make the server very confused, and besides, $30 really is enough. And we started this conversation we've been having for the last 2 years about what is a tip, right? What is appropriate? How do you respond, to servers? He's not clear on the details. I'm not sure he fully understands tipping, but it's something we're still working on. But what I love about the story is the way he anticipated each of my responses. Say, what am I going to do with you, right? And it's true. I sometimes do have to speak to him more sharply than that. He is a teenager. But like I say, these are interactions we're working out as we go. And then later, on that same trip, we came back to get our red-eye flight from Seattle to Pittsburgh. And that meant, we had to get ready to fly at midnight. Jamie had to get ready for bed at the airport. It made no sense to him. He said, all I wanted is a glass of chocolate milk. And I said, oh, fine, but then you brush your teeth. And I said, look, all the shops in the Seattle-Tacoma airport here are closed. So Jamie said, we should ask. And he walked up to a random person and said, do you know where there is chocolate milk? And I explained to Jamie that this somewhat nice man who only half smiled at the question did not work at the airport. But we got to find a Starbucks. Jamie waited at a bench. I got some water. I got some chocolate milk. And I was being served just as they closed at 10. The grate starts coming down. And I thought, maybe Jamie would be worried by this. And sure enough, I look around. He's got the Home Alone expression on. And I said, aha, this is how they recruit their employees. No. So I just gave him a thumbs up. I'll be fine. I gave him his chocolate milk. And then he did something that led me to teach a new word to him for what he's like. Conscientious. Our plane was supposed to leave at midnight. It was going to be delayed by an hour. I said, look, we're going to be here quite a while. I set him up with Harry Potter on the laptop. And at 11, I said, look, are you sleepy? He said, a little bit. Not that sleepy. I said, you're not that sleepy? I am very sleepy. He said, you sleep. I'll play Harry Potter right here. I said, oh, that's very sweet. But I didn't want to fall asleep and miss our plane. I didn't think he would wander off. But, falling asleep on the job is falling asleep on the job. Jamie said, Michael, you will not miss the plane. I will tell you when it comes. I looked at it with genuine surprise. I said, you will tell me when the plane comes? Mm-hmm. Now you sleep right here. Well, one of the side benefits of all this traveling around is that Jamie learns to become more independent, like finding restaurant bathrooms all by himself, but this seemed a bit much. I thought, well, what could possibly happen? I'd be right next to him. I wouldn't sleep so heavily that, if a passing lunatic tried to abscond with him, and I'd just close my eyes for a second, and of course I was out. 20 minutes later, he jostled my elbow and said, wake up, Michael. Our plane is here. And sure enough, passengers were coming out. Jamie was watching the whole time, and even while he was making his way through Hogwarts in his CD-ROM, because he is very conscientious and also observant and mature and independent. And one of the reasons I tell this story to Jamie is that I want to enhance his own sense of his independence and to remind him of how far he's come. He and I had a very serious conversation about 5 years ago about he'd asked to do about 8 or 9 things in the course of an afternoon, which would be fine. It's what kids do. Except that when Jamie gets it in his head that he's going to do 8 or 9 things, he makes a mental checklist and gets very disappointed if he doesn't hit all of them in the course of one day. So I said, look, you're very good at math. You have a great memory, but you really need to understand time better. And he was very abashed by that. I was just telling him, you need to forecheck better or something. You need to work on X. You need to understand how long things take and how much time we have to do them. Like, it takes an hour to go bowling. But he also didn't understand how to use temporal markers to indicate past action. He would say, we did it yesterday, when in fact we did it 10 years ago. Now, by contrast, he has a watch, and he keeps very careful track of what time it is, and he is exceptionally careful about remembering what things happened to him in what year and how old he was at the time. And I'm hoping I'm hoping that he can make a similarly impressive progress understanding an abstraction like money. Although I have to say, over the past few weeks, I'm not convinced that anyone really understands money. Especially money. I mean, seriously. And then when it comes to time, I got abstract with him the other day, and I said, look, it's so strange. Yeah, we have to be at such a place by 9 o'clock. We have to be at the plane by 7. But, no one really knows what time is. It's an amazing thing. And it only goes one way. It can never go backwards. You ever think of that? And Jamie says, not in the time turner. For you Harry Potter fans, Hermione has a time turner that makes time go backwards. He said it like that. So much for time's arrow. The other crucial factor has to do with his understanding of narrative, which again has to do with Harry Potter. And again, I'll just try to do one example. One night I was reading Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince to him as he was dropping off to sleep. Our routine goes like this, and we'll do it again tonight. He climbs into bed around 9:45, because he's a teenager and all. And he could fall asleep the minute his head hits the pillow, but he's so eager to hear the evening's Harry Potter installment that he keeps one eye open and fights for consciousness. And we reach a scene in which the young Dumbledore visits 11-year-old Tom Riddle, that's the young Voldemort, for those of you, in the orphanage in order to inform him that he is a wizard and extend him an invitation to Hogwarts. It's a very dramatic encounter. And Harry, and Jamie too, very interested in all this. And Jamie gasped at Tom's reaction to Dumbledore's invitation, and he stayed awake for another couple of passages. And then I said, here's this one passage. The orphans, Harry saw, were all wearing the same kind of grayish tunic. They looked reasonably well cared for, but there was no denying that this was a grim place in which to grow up. So I said a few words about the orphanage, and about Harry's moment of sympathy with the boy who grows up to be the incarnation of evil, right? Voldemort. So I said, did Harry have a happy childhood when he was growing up? No, said Jamie. He had the Dursleys. I said, right. I pointed out, Harry and Voldemort have similar upbringings. They grow up without parents, and the kids in orphanages are there because they have no parents either. And I said, you might remember this in the movie Like Mike, which just happens to be in his video collection. And Jamie said, or Free Willy. And Yes, that's right. Free Willy is also about a kid who's growing up without parents and who has step-parents, and he has trouble getting used to his new home. Yeah. He says, or Star Wars. Yes, Star Wars, right? Luke is an orphan. Yeah, good. He says, or Rookie of the Year. I said, no. In Rookie of the Year, what's his name? Henry has his mother, but his mother's boyfriend is a creep, and we don't know where his father went before he was born. Jamie said, Mrs. Doubtfire. I said, no, that's about parents who are divorced and live in different houses, but still, in Mrs. Doubtfire, the father misses his kids and wants to see them, so he dresses up as a nanny. And Jamie says, well, what about Babe? Oh, that's that's good. Because Babe has no parents. That's why he is so happy, right? When Fly agrees to be like his mother. And Jamie says, and Rex is like his father, and Ferdinand the Duck is like his brother. Yeah, wait, who knew that Jamie was thinking all this time about family configurations in all these movies? And who knew that Jamie knew that so many unhappy families, human and pig, are alike? Now, since then, he's done this. I don't know if you've seen Spiderwick Chronicles, but Jamie wanted to see it even though he's not familiar with the books. And Jamie says, Spiderwick Chronicles is also about divorce. No, it's not. It's about a haunted house. No, and sure enough, he's right. Night at the Museum, Jamie says, also about divorce. He's entirely right about both these things. In both these stories, the backstory is that the parents have gotten divorced and the kids have to find some, fantastic way of dealing with this. Now, if you're interested in this sort of thing, why so many of these stories happen to be about orphans is a really interesting literary theory kind of question about how fascinated we are about beginnings. We could say more about this. We're also concerned that our beginnings determine our endings. But I'd like to return for my own ending to Peter Singer and the little matter of what we can and can't expect of children with Down syndrome. In the opening pages of my book, Life as We Know It, I wrote that most of my time with Jamie was lived pretty much moment by moment. And I wrote this specific passage about 12 years ago. It goes like this. Occasionally, it will occur to Janet or to me that Jamie will always be disabled, that his adult and adolescent years will undoubtedly be more difficult emotionally for him and for us than his early childhood, that we will never not worry about his future, his quality of life, or whether we're doing enough for him. But usually these moments occur in the relative comfort of abstraction, when Janet and I are lying in bed at night and wondering what will become of us all. When I'm with Jamie, by contrast, I'm almost always fully occupied by taking care of his present needs rather than worrying about his future. When he asks to hear the Beatles because he loves their cover of Little Richard's Long Tall Sally, I just play the song and sing along and watch him dance with delight. I do not concern myself with extraneous questions such as whether he'll ever distinguish early Beatles from late Beatles, Paul's songs from John's, originals from covers. Those questions are now central to Nick's enjoyment of the Beatles, but that's Nick for you. Jamie is entirely sui generis, and as long as I'm with him, I can't think of him as anything but Jamie. Okay, that's the passage. The clear implication, though, here, folks, is you don't have to be a literature professor to catch it, is that a kid with Down syndrome would never have the intellectual capacity to understand the Beatles' oeuvre, or even understand that some songs predate others, or were written by different band members, or so forth. Well, this is overdue, but I owe Jamie a great big apology. I couldn't have been more wrong. Over the past 12 years, he has become fascinated with the Beatles, so fascinated that he's memorized almost their entire songbook. It started when he was about 8 or 9, when he was fascinated with Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite, and Come Together. He still gets a big kick out of Juju Eyeball, where I explained to him, well, John wrote those songs, and John liked to play games with words, and Jamie was so thrilled with this news that he demanded to know what else John had written. So I went back over the Beatles' output and found to my own surprise that John had written about 2/3 of the Beatles' originals in the first 4 records. And before I knew it, Jamie had memorized the Johns, as he put it, and proceeded to master the other 3 as well. For Ringo, we go by the songs he sang, not just the 2 he wrote. And then Jamie wanted to know who wrote Honey Don't, or Roll Over Beethoven, or Anna, Carl Perkins, Chuck Berry, Arthur Alexander, if you're interested. Then, as we made him presents of each CD, he began to understand which records contained which songs, and then he started to ask which came first. So I bought him one of my favorite books of rock criticism, Roy Carr and Tony Tyler's The Beatles, an Illustrated Record, and now he had a whole account of the year-by-year, record-by-record trajectory. And as we bought him more Beatles books, we learned that he has an amazing memory for other things as well. He said one day, "Remember when the Beatles were in the Bahamas?" I said, "No, I don't think the Beatles ever played the Bahamas." He says, "No, in Help." And sure enough, in one of the pictures in one of the coffee table books he has, there are the Beatles in the Bahamas. Score 1 for Jamie. Now he has a whole quiver full of these questions. Remember when the Beatles had a polo fight? Remember when John disappeared in the bathtub? Remember when Ringo was combing his hair in the bathroom at Shea Stadium? So when he's bored, or when we're trying to kill times in long lines or on long trips, Jamie asks me sometimes to do all Pauls, or whomever, and I will pick random tunes from here, there, and everywhere. I'll sing about 2 bars, close your eyes, and Jamie will jump in and say, "With the Beatles, 1963, next!" And I'll say, "Let me think," and he will mock me, and I'll sing, "Martha, my dear," and he'll say, "White Beatles, 1968, next!" And this can go on, as you might imagine, until my own memory is exhausted. And on one of our trips about a year ago, we waited about 15 minutes by the baggage carousel. We got through about 60 or 70 of these, much to the amusement and or annoyance of our fellow travelers, one of whom finally asked, "Did you already do Norwegian Wood?" But what makes this especially interesting to me is that he's not just cataloging information and spewing it back. That would be impressive enough. It would be a kind of computing kind of understanding. But somehow he's got everything sort of analogically cross-referenced. He names songs that I've forgotten. In other words, he's not just like all Paul, all John, right? He also associates specific words with specific songs. When he was in 5th grade, we were doing the words on his spelling list. The job was that he had to come up with a word, come up with a sentence for each word. And so for the word through, he came up with thick and thin, she will always be my friend. And then the word was your, apostrophe R-E, so he said, you're going to lose that girl. For picture, he came up with picture yourself in a boat on a river. Now, part of his homework involved, generating these sentences, and we finally said, look, you can't always use Beatles songs to do your homework. But, and this is the point, if you had asked me in 1994 if I'd ever have to say a sentence like that, stop using Beatles lyrics in your spelling word sentences homework, I would have given you a very dirty look. Now, I draw from all this what I hope is a useful conclusion. It might be a good idea for all of us to treat other humans as if we do not know their potential. as if they might in fact surprise us, as if they might defeat or exceed our expectations. It might be a good idea for us to check the history of the past few centuries whenever we think we know what normal human standards of behavior and achievement might be. It might be an even better idea to look at the recent history of early intervention and full inclusion, to see how our expectations for people with cognitive disabilities and our social practices with regard to people with cognitive disabilities have affected the actual lives of people with cognitive disabilities. As Jamie reminds me daily, both deliberately and unwittingly, most Americans had no idea what people with Down syndrome could achieve until we'd passed and implemented and interpreted and reinterpreted a law entitling them all to a free, appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment. And most broadly, thank you. And most broadly, it might be a good idea to expand the possibilities of democracy itself, precisely because democracy offers us unfinished and infinitely revisable forms of political organization that stand the best chance, in the long run, of responding adequately to the human rights of the unpredictable creatures we humans are. That might be one way of recognizing and respecting something you might want to call our human dignity. And so, Jamie, I admit it, even when I was trying to represent you to the best of my ability when I wrote Life as We Know It, I underestimated you. I was wrong, and I apologize. And through thick and thin, I will always be your friend.